Hello everyone, my name is Nura Anwar, and my topic for today is Bhopal years later. This is my final presentation for Professor Jack Caravanos' class for Global Environmental Health for the fall 2017 semester. Okay, so Bhopal is located in Madhya Pradesh, India, which literally means the middle of the country. On December 2nd, 1984, India's most terrific industrial nightmare had occurred. Warren Anderson's Union Carbide India Limited plant in Bhopal, India had ruined the lives of present and future generations due to a deadly gas leak. The industrial pesticide generator was placed in India to combat the drought seasons India faced in the 1950s and onwards. 7. The name of the pesticide was produced using a deadly chemical called MIC, or methyl isocyanate. MIC is volatile, highly corrosive when it comes into contact with water, is colorless, and has a pungent odor. If you take a look at the images that are on the slide, actually, the area in the map that's highlighted with the blue, that is exactly where the plant was located. And the first image is an image of MIC. And the second image where you see the person pouring the liquid, that was sort of a way to show that after we started the Union Carbide plant here, that India would restore back to its agricultural ways because India had been facing some droughts since 1950s and they were trying to combat that issue. Okay. All right, before I go any further, I want to pause and just look at the table of contents. So the first slide will be about the purpose and objectives of this presentation. The second slide will show figure 1, which is the total deaths graph after the Bhopal gas leak of 1984. The next slide will show figure 2, which is the table of immediate and prolonged health effects. Figure 3 will show the male tongue and mouth cancer incidences over time. Figure 4 will go over the female breast cancer and ovarian cancer incidences over time. Figure F will go over a retrospective study on lung function abnormalities, which are going to be shown using figure 6, 7, and 8. And the next slide will be the summary of the lessons learned and the present situation in Bhopal. And the last slide will be the references. Okay, so going back to our story. So MIC had come into contact with water in that deadly night when workers were cleaning the plant with water, but did not take the right safety precautions, such as inserting the slip lines first. Gases leaked and reacted with the water, setting off an instant toxic haze across Bhopal. Within minutes, people's eyes began to water. Unexplained coughing, vomiting, crying children all took over Bhopal. Unaware of what to do next, people ran for their lives. However, the best way to deal with this was simply by staying indoors, shutting all forms of open vents, and using damp towels. So as you can see in this image that is on the right side, these are where all the issues occurred and what led to sort of the gas leak. So had these issues been prevented, the gas leak probably would not have occurred. So if you take a look, the MIC storage tanks, there's 40 tons in E610, and 15 tons in E611. E619 was empty, and the water leaked into E610, which caused a runaway heat-producing reaction. So MIC already functions at very high temperatures, and when it comes into contact with water, it just escalates to 250 degrees within seconds, and then it becomes very hard to control the situation. Also, there was a refrigerator system. The Freon system to cool liquid MIC was shut down in June 1984 to save money, and Freon shipped to other plants. Also, the flare tower, which was designed to burn off gas, but a connecting pipe had been removed for maintenance. So there were ways to prevent it, but unfortunately, even the ways to prevent it were not working at that time. If we take a look at the water current, it wasn't high enough to reach the gas. So that also could have prevented the situation, but unfortunately was not working during that time. The vent gas scrubber, so basically leaking gas could have been detoxified, but the scrubber was also turned off. Okay, so let's take a look at this figure that has the numbers of mortality and morbidity. Okay, so as you can see, of the 520,000 victims that were affected by this gas tragedy, more than 200,000 victims faced permanent harm. This way, The way the haze worked was that it settled down closer to the bottom of the ground due to its density, which means that the toddlers who knew how to walk were closest in proximity to the ground, and thus they inhaled the air more and instantly died. The elderly also passed away quicker than others because their age already made their immune system weak, and then when a deadly gas entered their lungs, pulmonary edema instantly succumbed their lives. There were also many chemicals within the air and different amounts of each chemical reach different areas. So this is what led to the varied health effects on different people because different chemicals were reaching different people that were in different proximities from the gas plant. And so what ended up happening was the death count kept changing. So at first, there were 2,259 deaths in 1984. And then as time went by and they were going through the dead bodies, the unknown dead bodies, and the unclaimed bodies, eventually by 1995, the figure had actually stopped at 15,200. So you can see how quickly the number of deaths escalated and how difficult it was to get a count of how many deaths were actually involved. Okay. Also, stillbirths increased by 300%. Spontaneous abortions increased by 300 to 400%. Peri and neonatal deaths had risen by 300%. All livestock and animals passed away within hours. The green grass quickly turned yellow and families were separated. So because of all this panic, families did not know exactly what to do. So a lot of them thought running away or, if the family members split into different directions, maybe someone will be saved. In terms of animals, they cannot handle the toxicity of the MIC chemical. So as soon as they inhaled it, it was just sort of like on-the-spot death. Even the environmental, if you think about it, the grass, the fact that it changed into yellow color can show just how vast the effects are of this gas leak. Abortions happen instantaneously, and stillbirths increased, like I said, by 300%. So these are some of the effects of the gas leak that were happening sort of instantaneously. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so over here I have a table of long-term health effects. So like I said, unfortunately, the way that the gas leak worked was that, yes, there were immediate effects in the people that were present in the situation. However, the effects have gone on to affect people of future generations as well. So if you look at the areas of effect, so for example, within the eyes, the effect that occurred there was chronic conjunctivitis, scars on the cornea, corneal opacities, and early cataracts. So instantly when people came into contact with the fumes, what happened was their eyes started feeling very irritated. It was as if a lot of the survivors described it as if someone was burning chilies and onions, and then that sort of sting or that irritation that you feel in their eyes is what they started feeling, but it was a million times worse. In terms of the respiratory tract, so obstructive or restrictive lung disease, pulmonary fibrosis, aggravation of tuberculosis, and chronic bronchitis were all effects. The neurological system, so memory, impairment, amnesia happened sort of instantaneously. There was a loss of fine motor skills, and there was an increased amount of numbness within people. When you look at the psychological problems, PTSD, depression, and other mental health issues started sort of happening rampantly after this incident. For women's reproductive health, increased abortion and miscarriages, menstrual cycle issues, white discharge, ovarian cancer, and breast cancer were all on the rise. For children's health, increased mortality rate, congenital malformations, stunted growth, intellectual impairment, and body deformities are still seen today. So even if, for example, let's say a certain family was alive during the situation, they were affected by it, their fifth and sixth generations are still seeing the effects. So their children are being born with deformities, which means that there's some cytogenic and chromosomal changes that occurred, which have been passed on to future generations. Okay, so according to a study done by the National Cancer Registry Program in India, MIC, in the MIC affected and unaffected areas, it was found that males who resided in the affected areas have seen a positive trend in tongue cancer and mouth cancer over the years. So Basically, it's also important to note that the socioeconomic status of the people residing in Bhopal also placed them at a greater risk when it came to cancer. Furthermore, the usage of tobacco further exacerbated their situations. So, as you can see, the tongue cancer rates keep increasing, and so did mouth cancer. And if you look at the timeline, it starts from 1985-ish, and then it continues all the way on into well after 2005. So again, the effects are still ongoing and can be seen throughout. Okay. If we take a look at the trends in female cancer rates, so this is also from that same study I mentioned previously. So basically, breast cancer and ovarian cancer, the number of incidences, if you take a look, they keep on increasing, right? So even the trend line is showing that positive trend. Although breast cancer is increasing more rapidly than ovarian cancer, these are all connected to the effects I had mentioned previously about the menstrual cycle problems, the problems with the miscarriages and abortions. They're all correlated with each other. Okay. Okay, so if we take a look here, so according to a retrospective case study that was conducted by Bhopal Memorial Hospital and Research Center, out of 5,972 participants, 4,782 participants were considered to be cases because they were exposed to the aerosol of MIC, and there were 1,190 controls, which were defined as being individuals who were unexposed to the aerosol of MIC. Those results are summarized in Figure 5. Also, there were females and males that were recruited for this study. So basically, in order to understand lung functioning abnormalities, spirometry tests were conducted, and the results ranged from 2001 to 2009. Also, the funny thing is that the reason they did this study was because patients came in complaining around 2009 that they were having irritation in their lungs, and then so the hospital staff decided to take this a step further and figure out what was happening, because they did understand that perhaps it was connected to the events of the gas leak. And that is what sort of led to this study being conducted. Okay, so moving on. So basically, the findings show that the gas-exposed victims, a total of 64% of the participants had shown some sort of obstructive or restrictive pattern in their lung functions. Okay, so if you take a look at Figure 6, you can see the breakdown. So the yellow portion of the pie chart represents 51% of the cases that had the obstructive pattern in terms of their lung functioning. The green portion of that same pie graph shows 638 participants of the gas-exposed group who had the restrictive pattern in their lungs, and 1,714 of the cases, which represents 36%, and the light pink portion of the pie chart, had normal functioning lungs. Okay, so if we take a look at Figure 7, you can see the percentage of smoking and non-smoking gas victims. So basically, from the gas victim group, 2,056 individuals, or 43% of the participants, were active or ex-smokers. 2,726, or 57% of the participants, were non-smokers. In this study, the socioeconomic status and the smoking habits of the individuals were also considered when trying to evaluate the lung function abnormalities. Again, the other point to note is that Bhopal is socioeconomically not a rich area, and the people who do live in this area make roughly less than $300, or $300, I would say, throughout the whole year. So basically, because of their socioeconomic conditions, a lot of them do not know better, and they resort to things such as smoking without understanding the true effects of what smoking does cause them in terms of the long-term health effects. So, and some of these participants, they have seen elder generations smoke too, even during the gas leak. So smoking definitely exacerbates their already current deteriorating situation. Okay, so we are at the end of the presentation almost, so now we are going to look at sort of what were the lessons learned and the current situation. Okay, so Saturday, December 2nd, 2017, will be marking the 33rd anniversary of the Bhopal gas tragedy. Union Carbide CEO Warren Anderson had already passed away, but he never fully compensated nor took full responsibility for the Bhopal tragedy. Victims and their current generations are still seeking justice for the damages in the past, for current damages, and for future damages that are yet to come. The research and data available about the Bhopal incident strengthens the importance of occupational health standards, raising awareness about chemicals and industrial processes. Furthermore, the deteriorating health effects such as the increased lung abnormalities, increasing rates of breast, ovarian, mouth, and tongue cancer prove that a minor mistake can cause major irreversible consequences. The worst part is the health effects and the damages are still being discovered to this day. This was not a one-night disaster. This is an ongoing chemical and human disaster. Originally, the plant had been placed in Bhopal to produce the magic pesticide that would lead to agricultural profits. However, choosing a more environmentally friendly, human-friendly approach to combat the agricultural issue may have been the better route. Okay, so these are my references. Thank you so much for viewing my presentation, and I would like to stress that if you can, please try and visit the video links that I have provided. I know that I have tried to explain to the best of my ability what happened in Bhopal and what the health after effects were, but watching these documentaries really do have a greater impact, so perhaps you might want to watch these videos to understand just what the reality was behind this whole situation. Have a wonderful rest of the semester, everyone, and thank you once again.